Good afternoon. Thank you for sticking around. I think we are the last panel, keeping you guys from a couple drinks during our happy hour. So thank you for being here and being patient. Let's give our panelists, why don't you get started and introduce yourself, and then we'll wait for Mandeep, just so we can get going.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending and staying for the grand finale. That's our panel. My name is Migdad Buriwala. I am a utility analyst at San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. I work in the redevelopment team. It's a really fascinating group. We are a team that's dedicated towards bringing physical assets into the ground, and in the terms of electricity, wires, transformers, everything you need to be able to serve electricity to the end users, which is the public. San Francisco is embarking on a very fascinating kind of endeavor, which is to deliver power directly to the customer and trying to challenge the monopoly that is PG&E. And so that obviously comes with a lot of interesting challenges, as well as some innovative solutions to be needed. So that's the team I'm a part of, and we do a lot of coordination with third-party contractors, developers, housing authorities. So it's a really interesting field to learn so much about many different infrastructural elements and have that all come together in our redevelopment projects.
Thank you. I think we'll wait for Mandeep now. While we wait, just a little bit about myself. So I'm with Oracle. I'm a recent transplant from the East Coast, from New York City, and I've participated in a few of these panels and at InfraDays across the US. And what I've noticed here today is definitely a theme of conversations around emissions, saving energy, electrification, all of the above. And it makes me think of I have a 9-year-old who's in 4th grade, and he's in the California school system, and he's learning about pioneers right now, and going from the gold rush, and then switching over to looking for oil and all the other things. So it makes me think of California has always sort of been a pioneer in trying new things and being brave about it, and being the first to step foot. So with that said, I think, I don't think she's joining, I'm not sure. But I'll skip over some of Mandeep's question, and we'll get right to it. But with these opportunities that we have in front of us, there's also a lot of challenges. So maybe, Migdad, you can talk about some of the challenges that you guys are facing in San Francisco as you embark on some of these projects.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I just would like to reiterate when you mentioned California being a pioneer in this industry. It's actually the reason I moved here, was to pursue this field in a place that was surrounded with people like you all. And coming from Texas, it's a much different environment in California. Obviously, the issues are different too. Some of the issues that our team runs into, and I know PUC in general, with the grid modernization, one is space constraints, especially in an urban core like San Francisco, fighting for space in a public right-of-way, especially in the era now in which everything must be underground. So really having coordination with all the different agencies that are in under the streets. And it's actually always fascinating whenever a road is being worked on, or you can see under what goes underneath all the asphalt, and there's so much going on. It's like the human body with all the veins and arteries. There's so much going on that we don't see, and it's the term black boxing. And so San Francisco is an older city that's really maintained its charm and their identity, but with that has aged infrastructure. And so now to modernize and electrify the whole city, it comes with supply constraints as well as the space.
Thank you. So before we go into the next questions, I'd like Mandeep to introduce herself, and we'll go into a little bit more conversation about regulations.
Yeah, my name is Mandeep Samra. I'm from the city of Burbank. I head power supply at Burbank. So we are a 322 megawatt facility with our energy load. We have about 53,000 customers. We also have an eco campus where we do innovative projects. And I've been at Burbank for 3 years, in the utility industry for 20.
Thank you. So we started out talking about California being a pioneer in this field. We've heard so many sessions today that touch on this very subject, right? But I think maybe, at least myself, in preparing for this session, there was a lot of things I didn't know. So I think, how many of you are actually aware of what the state mandates really are? Raise your hand if you know what the state mandates is. Just a couple of you. So I'd like Mandeep, if you could just give everybody a little bit of an overview, because it is quite striking what those are. And with such high tasks and really lofty endeavors in front of us, there's a lot of challenges. It's not as easy as some of the panels earlier make it sound, right? They all run into issues. So please.
Yeah, so in California, we have some restrictive and prescriptive mandates for renewable portfolios. And the other thing I want to mention too is clean energy and renewables aren't one of the same. They both have zero carbon, but renewables are defined by the California Energy Commission. So for example, clean energy is large hydro resources like Hoover Dam, as well as nuclear resources like Palo Verde or Diablo Canyon. And renewables are solar, wind, biogas, geothermal, et cetera, that come with renewable energy credits. So I wanted to bifurcate that. But in terms of rules and regulations, the first regulation came out in 2011, SBX 12. That started the mandate for publicly owned utilities such as Burbank, 33% renewables by 2020. And then you had SB 350 that set the requirement for 60% renewables or 50% renewables by 2030. Then you had SB 100 that set a goal of 60% renewables by 2030 with a 100% goal by 2045. And in 2022, Senate Bill 1020 passed. Senate Bill 1020 set a mandate for 90% clean carbon goal by 2035 and 95% clean carbon goal by 2040. Burbank has a goal of 100% clean energy by 2040, but those are just some of the regulations. But within those regulations, we also have to do long-term contracts. So 65% of your requirements have to be long-term contracts, which are 10 years or longer in duration. You can't just do one-year contracts. They also have categories for renewables. Not all the renewables are the same. And the most expensive are portfolio content category 1, which comes with the energy and the renewable energy credit together delivered at the same time. Unfortunately, with COVID and a lot of the infrastructure delays, a lot of those projects just aren't coming on right now. So just a lot going on there, a lot of restrictive mandates, and you also have other mandates that are coming and making it more restrictive as well.
Thank you for that. I don't think many of us knew how it's changing, and it keeps increasing and keeping California on its toes, right? So what are some of the main challenges in meeting these carbon goals, Mandeep?
Yeah, for Burbank, I will say a lot of the challenges is the infrastructure requirements, the interconnection queues to get renewables built. A lot of that is not happening. A lot of the manufacturing for the solar and the wind panels are actually overseas. So during COVID, you had about a 2.5 to 3 year standstill with those being developed, and we're actually seeing 3 to 5 year delays in the construction of new renewables. I was at a conference last week where a lot of people in the Midwest were saying they could just get renewables here and there. We can't. There are a lot of entities going after the same contract. Prices keep going up. And at what point do you say this is just too much and it's going to be detrimental to the ratepayers? So you have to consider that. Secondly, transmission is a major constraint. We are part of the Los Angeles Balancing Authority, not the California Independent System Operator. I can't just buy renewables anywhere. I have to buy them on the 6 paths that I have. And I don't have capacity in every single path. So I'm looking in certain areas to buy it. And then lastly, there's a lot of developer constraints. A lot of renewable developers are putting the risk on the utility or the buyer. For example, in the past, we would have language in contracts that say the developer will ensure that this is a renewable resource as applicable by law. They're trying to take those requirements out, which is really difficult for a publicly owned utility to sign a contract where you're not quite sure if it is going to be a renewable contract. So a lot of those things are coming up, making it more difficult.
Thank you. So how is your agency or utility different or more unique than somebody else, than another agency? What are you guys doing different?
So I'll take this one. Burbank does a lot of transparency. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement. We interact with the public pretty much daily. I just met with a member of the public that wanted to know what our long-term energy plans was today for lunch. And I walked through with that individual what they were, what our plans were, how much it's gonna cost, how we're gonna get there. So what Burbank does differently is meet with the public, meet with our ratepayers on a regular basis. We also, with our long-term energy plan, did stakeholder meetings. We did 9 stakeholder meetings, which is a smaller group representative of our ratepayers. We did 4 community meetings where we met with anyone that showed up in 4 different locations throughout Burbank to discuss our long-term plans for energy procurement. We walked through the requirements, we walked through the cost, we walked through what the bill impacts would be, and we did that consistently. I also went to the board. We have a utility board every month to give an update. I continue to do that with our costs, with compliance, with where we're going, how we're gonna get there. And I also go to city council a couple of times a year to give an update on resource planning, how much it's gonna cost, ratepayer impacts. Just being very transparent also with the state, because we have so many prescriptive requirements, we do go pretty regularly up to the state to talk to the governor's office, the senators, the assemblymen and their staff to talk about some of the issues that we're having. I think we're probably the most vocal for being a medium-sized utility, and we are getting some traction on some of these issues, so that is what we do. That's pretty different from some of the others. We also have an eco-campus. It's a 10-acre eco-campus in the middle of LA, right? We're right off the 5, just north of the 134. And we have a place that we could actually pilot technology. So 2 weeks ago, we installed an iron flow energy storage system. It's long duration, the first of its kind for a public utility in Southern California. So we try to be innovative as well.
Kind of like our Oracle Innovation Lab in Chicago, so great stuff. McDad, how about you?
Yeah, from my time at San Francisco Public Utilities, I think something that sets us apart is, one, our goal right now, especially on our power sector, to, like I mentioned, really start to compete with PG&E, who's a long-standing, monolithic organization that's everyone seems to complain about or have some, gripe. And so I think it's interesting to take that on in a strategic sense. And that's one thing I really do find interesting about the work in PUC is the strategy involved. We, like most other government agencies, have to think long term, but in this way, we're kind of thinking in a corporate sense too. The way we operate, it is a fusion of government and corporate thinking, which I think is very helpful, and especially in some of the goals that we want to achieve. Another thing that's adjacent to that is I believe that PUC has really invested in its people and its personnel, whether that's competing for talent in higher pay industries that are dominating in the Bay Area. A lot of the coworkers that I've met have come from tech adjacent jobs who have wanted to kind of start using their expertise, their knowledge into the public sphere. And so being able to do that kind of work, I think, is very empowering for a lot of people, especially in my generation. I think people are clamoring to work in agencies and industries that they know will create good. But it's hard to find those things while also balancing things like being paid fairly. So I think PUC does do a really good job of investing in its personnel, and you can see that with the talent that we have. Very intelligent people who can really get the job done and have really great ideas on how to take it further. So that's
Probably helps with innovation, I'm sure.
Definitely,
Yeah. So we definitely have some suppliers and contractors in the room as well. Let's switch the conversation a little bit about purchasing agreements. So Mandeep, what are some of the challenges in developing these agreements, and how can we overcome those challenges?
Yes, so the power purchase agreements for renewables have just gotten more complex over time. Burbank works with the Southern California Public Power Authority to do joint power projects. For economies of scale, we usually need a couple of partners to do contracts with a large renewable developer. We have a pro forma, a template that we use for the PPAs. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the major obstacles we're having is risk mitigation. Historically, the risk would be equal, half on the developer, half on the buyer. Now it's pretty much, I would say, more 90% on the buyer. So as a publicly owned utility, you have to make a decision. Do you go and sign a contract that may or may not be renewable? The price may change midway through. They may not be able to deliver and there's no consequence. Or do you move on from that developer and look for a new deal? So a lot of those issues are coming to the forefront that did not exist pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, it would take me about 6 months to do a contract. Right now, we're doing 6 months on an exclusivity agreement, so we could be the sole entity working with that developer, and another 18 months to develop the contract. So you're looking at over 2 years. Since I started at Burbank 3 years ago, we were probably in about 8 to 10 contracts. Of those, we only signed one, and it's been 3 years. So I think the challenge of how long it's taking, what the cost is going to be, a lot of the developers aren't telling us what the cost is up front. So some of the time they give us a range and they say, oh, it could also go above the range. They're also pushing back on security deposits, letter of credit, and like I said, the regulatory language as well. So it's just been challenging, and a lot of these developers are the multi-billion-dollar, developers for renewable energy. We're having more success with the mom and pop developers. They're doing 10 megawatt or 20 megawatt contracts. Those are a lot easier for us to deal with. That's who we did the last 2 deals with, were smaller agencies and smaller developers. So we're just seeing a lot of obstacles in getting things built. And the interconnection queue delays are pretty massive. They're about 3 to 4 years for the LABA and a lot longer for the California Independent System Operator. So projects aren't coming online, the price is unknown and just going through the roof, and then the risk mitigation is placed on the buyer. In this case, it would be Burbank Water and Power. And at one point, you have to decide as an executive, do you sign that contract and not know if it's gonna deliver, or you just walk away? And in many cases, we will walk away.
So considering contractors and their role today, what is their role today in your ideal world, and how can they become more reliable partners in the future so that your clean energy projects are more successful? Why don't we start with you, Dad?
Well, I would like to, from what I've learned, is to make a real big impact in government is you find an engineer and you become their best friend, and you provide them the solutions that they need to move things forward. I have a lot of respect for the engineers at the PUC. I believe that they are doing some of the most important work, and their knowledge base is just so extensive, and they're the experts. And so to any contractor, I would say, like, for example, learning about 4M today was, I'm gonna run to my engineer friends tomorrow and talk to them about it, like mapping, utility mapping. It's a great solution that I feel like now the technology is kind of catching up to the public service scope. Like I mentioned earlier, attention, even in the workforce, is now transitioning towards how can we help create solutions for our overall communities, our cities, our nation, our world. And so it's also good to see private companies really investing in their solutions, their products to really bolster that kind of impact. And so the roles that contractors have, I mean, it can be, ideally, it'd be a trusted partner within the ecosystem. I studied city planning, and what we were taught over and over is to really incorporate the overall community, find the roles, find the niche. Every entity has a place that they can create impact. And so to integrate contractors efficiently with transparency and an aim for partnership rather than one that's like done out of need or one that's done with not trust. I think that can lead to issues, but having a contractor that's really like the best friend or a really trusted asset, I think that can really open a lot of doors, not only for a government agency who can really appreciate and benefit from the agility that contractors have, the ability that contractors have to integrate the innovation, the technology innovation. A few panels ago, we were talking so much about the influx of science and technology, and sometimes governments can be a little bit slower to adapt and incorporate and integrate that within their policies, but a private company has so much more ability to really harness that. And being in California, being in the place with so much innovation and potential, I think contractors can really lead the charge, and we've seen some really amazing ones today, and I feel like just continue to work to find the right solutions to help these bigger issues and what we're seeing in climate change and trying to really address those issues. And I think they will really find a population that's really interested in their work.
Yeah, and you mentioned technologies that we heard about, throughout different panels earlier today. So as we move forward into high-tech infrastructure development, what skills do you think contractors should be equipped with to work with you guys and to be successful? Let's continue with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think, well, the most apparent for my agency and Power is everything we're doing now is underground. So learning that specific field of utility management and installation, obviously that requires a little bit more technical specifications, more trained individuals. So one thing like that to keep up with what is happening, you may even in a thing like underground, making sure that your workforce is now being trained towards the future or is in the process of getting trained to be more in the future, what's going to happen. Other things, like I mentioned, I mentioned about the utility tracking asset, things like that, where you can give the ability to really manage your assets for a government to really look at and understand the historical data, and then use that to look towards the future for projection. I think that's really important, especially in this time period where we're running into procurement issues and scarcity, where the whole world is trying to become, electrify and everything. So we're not just competing with local entities. It's a competitive worldwide environment. And so learning how to use best practices from other non-conventional methods as well, I think is really important. I have kind of a global background based on my culture and my upbringing and where I was born. And so I've gone to see a lot of the cool different infrastructure that's gone on around the world. And so I also urge, and I tell my friends and my colleagues and share with them some of the innovative stuff that's happening all around the world. And you can see it in some of these countries like in Asia or in the Middle East, and the way that they're building their cities and integrating high technology it's pretty fascinating and impressive. And I think that if we can start to look at them and also appreciate what they've done and, reduce our own ego and can, take on other nations' successes, I think that's beyond workforce training. I think, learning to do that is really important.
That's a really good point. So my takeaway from that is also, learning a common language. So you might be a contractor that's an expert at a particular cost control solution, but if you don't know how to speak to a utility, it's going to be hard to convey the value that you're bringing, right? So having those types of skills is important. And then the other takeaway is travel more to be inspired by what others are doing around the world. So thank you for that. But with that, we have other issues that we're going to talk about. So during COVID, obviously everybody heard about the supply chain issues. I just want to talk about that for a moment. Are those still relevant today? And if so, for the utility industry here, especially in California, what are your agencies doing to mitigate the risk?
So for Burbank, this still exists. We're actually still facing major delays in the development of renewable projects. Some of our neighboring utilities have been waiting for solar panels to be delivered and installed for their renewable contracts that should have been online last year. So they're seeing a year plus delay at the ports. When we had some tariffs placed on Chinese goods, they were really at the ports for about 9 months before they were being allowed to come in. So you have a lot of facilities that just are waiting for the parts, are ready to go. And on the other side, there's just not enough. The supply is very low compared to the demand. I had talked about it before. All the utilities have these mandates, but a lot of the large corporations also have these mandates. In Burbank, we are home to many studios, and some of those studios, like Disney, for example, they have sustainability goals. They're looking to buy these types of contracts too. They're looking to install solar panels. So we're competing against more people than we were, more entities than we were pre-COVID. And we're seeing that in the delay with all of our contracts. The contracts we are negotiating today will not come online until post-2027. And that's if we were to sign it today. We're not going to sign them today. They're going to take a couple more years. But that is the reality of the situation. The other issue is with the tariffs. It really depends who the next president is, if there's going to be additional tariffs on goods from outside the United States. And that's going to impact the cost as well. And that's the reason you see a lot of developers not setting the cost right now, because it does depend on what the future cost for tariffs could also be. We're also seeing major issues in labor shortages. So we are part of, I know this is a clean energy panel, but we do have a coal facility in Utah, and we don't have truck drivers to deliver the coal to the coal facility. We don't have railway engineers to drive the trains to deliver to the coal facility. So it's just a lot of issues across the board, which is labor and supply.
Todd, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I think dealing with material shortages, it's such a complicated issue. There's not a very clear way forward. I think PUC in San Francisco, it is blessed with certain advantages. One, that it has overwhelming support from its local politicians and in the state. So I think that helps the agency absorb some of the setbacks, as well as because the PUC generates more of their own revenue by selling electricity back. That definitely gives them some of a cushion as well. So in those ways, it's mitigating some of the risks and issues, but we're still dealing with the same complications. And I believe some of the ways forward is try to innovate as much as possible. Things like transformers and wires, you're gonna have the material input, but they're here to say, like, maybe where some of these contractors can help us out is to innovate some.
I was just gonna go there, right? It's, labor shortages, you're probably going to rely a little bit more on the contractor community. So with that, how can contractors help government agencies and utilities become more transparent and allow them to be more accountable in order to make the public aware of what's going on, the progress of their projects, and ultimately become successful? You can start, Mcdad.
Yeah, I think that the role of contractors in this is it's important. I would speak to any contractor here is if you are working with your government counterpart, it's good to make sure the ball is continuously rolling. Deadlines are really important, and being on the same page and being very active in your communications is important. I do, on some of the calls I sit in, I can sense some sort of passive communications, and if what I mentioned earlier, if it is a trusted partner, if they are all on the same team, I believe a little, active communication is really imperative to driving the deadlines to making sure the deadlines are on track as possible, to make sure the work is staying on track, it's staying at priority and things like that. So I know that some different agencies move at different paces, and I think that's a good thing as well. And different responsibilities dictate that. But just to mesh more with communication and honest communication and active communication, I think it helps to drive things forward.
Yep, so I've heard this earlier today, partnership and collaboration, right? So Mandy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think with Burbank, we are installing a lot of solar panels on commercial properties and city properties. We're doing the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center. We're installing 2.5 megawatts of solar. So I encourage everyone here that are contractors to look at a request for proposals. We're going to have a lot more coming for solar vendors, energy storage vendors, design build contracts. So that is what we're looking at for the future to really mitigate some of the supply chain issues we're having. We're even open to buying some of the solar panels up front because we do have a warehouse where we could store them as well. So we really are looking for partnerships with new innovative companies where they could do it efficiently and effectively.
Thank you. Well, we did want to wrap it up a little earlier today, so last question. What are your long-term plans for energy planning? And are there any specific projects you want to highlight, anything you haven't highlighted yet to this point? I'll start with you, Mikdad.
I think the projects in the future, the PUC is doing some really cool projects in general, work a lot with affordable housing, the mega affordable housing units, and anything that's being built from the ground up. But something I find really fascinating, again, highlighting the 4M today, is utility mapping. Knowing what's going on underground is so important. Being able to really have the data and be able to see all the assets, I think it's the future, and it should have been done before, but that's something that I'm beginning to work on a little bit as well. And it's extensive, like, you have assets in so many different places as a government, your responsibilities are all over, and so to be very knowledgeable of all the material and the responsibilities, I think that is something that's I'm looking forward to in utility management.
In the future, yeah. Mandy?
For Burbank, we just finished our long-term plan, which is the Integrated Resources Plan, and our outcome is quite unique compared to some of the other utilities in the state. We are part of the Intermountain Power Project Renewal, which is a hydrogen/natural gas facility in Utah. Burbank will have a 28 megawatt share of this hydrogen and natural gas facility. It'll be the largest green hydrogen resource in the United States when it's built, and it'll be built next year. June 2025 is when it comes online. The other thing that we're looking at is additional long duration storage on our eco campus. I had mentioned earlier that we have an iron flow battery by ESS Incorporated that was sponsored by American Public Power Association. They paid for half of the installation. So we're testing out and piloting technologies. I had also referenced, just going back to the IRP, the two outcomes were we need to look at transmission options, do additional transmission agreements, build out transmission. That has not been something that was on Burbank's map or forethought at any point when before I was here. So we're actually looking to partner with other utilities to build access to additional transmission lines. We're also the only utility in the state of California that is looking at a clean energy resource by the name of small modular reactors outside the state of California. Those are safe nuclear reactors, but not in California. They're base load, they run 24/7. There was a project with Idaho National Lab earlier that fell apart, But the technology is still out there, and we're looking for partners and vendors. But like I said, we're the only public utility in the state that's been forthcoming with wanting to do that. And the reason we want to do that is because it's clean energy. We have transmission where it can be installed, and it is base load, meaning that it's 24/7 to help supplement the intermittent resources such as solar and wind. Lastly, we are the operating agent for a 300 megawatt combined cycle plant on our campus. So we are looking for options to make it clean in the future. And the options are to partner with Angeles Link and SoCal Gas to see if we could deliver hydrogen to that facility, what it's gonna cost to modify that, other options for that facility as well, because the state does have these mandates for clean energy by 2045, and Burbank has it by 2040. On the transmission side, we are looking for 4 kV to 12 kV conversions. We are also partnering, like I mentioned, with a lot of the commercial customers in the city to install solar so the utility can take that solar and the renewable energy credits coupled with storage.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So we are at time. Thank you very much for being here. Our panelists, why don't we give them a round of applause? And if anyone would like to ask them questions, Mandeep probably has like 5 minutes because she has to run to another conference. But they'll be outside to take any questions. Thank you.